After the devastating end of World War I, Germany was not just defeated, it was humiliated. The Treaty of Versailles forced the nation to pay billions in reparations, disband much of its army, and surrender territories. The once proud German Empire was reduced to a broken nation, its people stripped of dignity and hope. Families could barely survive. Bread prices skyrocketed, and money lost its value overnight. A single loaf of bread could cost millions of marks. Parents carried wheelbarrows filled with useless banknotes, only to exchange them for a little food. Hunger, poverty, and shame filled every corner of German life. In this darkness, a voice began to rise. Adolf Hitler, a former soldier, spoke with fire in his words. He pointed fingers at the treaty, at politicians, and at minorities. His speeches ignited the anger of the people. He promised strength, unity, and a new Germany. To many desperate citizens, Hitler was not just a politician, he was the savior they had been waiting for. Crowds filled stadiums to hear him speak, chanting, cheering, and believing every promise. But while the people dreamed of hope, a storm of hatred and destruction was already gathering behind his words. Hitler understood something that many leaders before him had ignored: the power of propaganda. He knew that controlling the minds of the people was just as important as controlling their armies. In 1933, Joseph Goebbels was appointed as Minister of Propaganda. From that moment, every poster, every radio broadcast, every newspaper headline carried a single message: Germany will rise again. Images of Hitler were everywhere, showing him as a father to the nation, a strong leader chosen by destiny. The swastika became more than just a symbol. It was painted on banners, stamped on coins, and waved in every street. To children, it was normal. To adults, it became a sign of hope and also of fear. The Nazi regime also used cinema. Movies were produced not just for entertainment, but to spread hatred and loyalty. Radios were made cheap so every household could hear Hitler's speeches. Night rallies with burning torches and thousands chanting created an atmosphere where questioning the regime felt impossible. And slowly, the people were not just following Hitler, they were worshiping him. The propaganda machine had turned a broken nation into a loyal army, ready to obey. Once Hitler had full control of Germany, his ambitions grew beyond its borders. He spoke of creating a Third Reich that would last 1,000 years. But to achieve that, Germany needed Lebensraum, living space. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland, a region that had been demilitarized after World War I. France and Britain protested, but did nothing. This weakness only encouraged Hitler further. Then came Austria. In 1938, with cheering crowds welcoming German troops, Austria was annexed into the Reich, what Hitler called the Anschluss. No bullet was fired, and yet a nation disappeared overnight. Later that year, Hitler set his eyes on Czechoslovakia. The Munich Agreement allowed him to take the Sudetenland, again without resistance. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned home, declaring he had secured peace for our time. But in reality, Hitler was only buying time to prepare for a much bigger war. By 1939, the invasion of Poland marked the point of no return. Hitler had unleashed World War II, and his vision of world domination had begun. The expansion was no longer a dream, it was a terrifying reality. Hitler's war strategy was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was called Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The idea was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and overwhelm the enemy before they had time to react. German tanks, known as Panzers, rolled across fields at incredible speed. Above them, the Luftwaffe, Hitler's air force, rained bombs on cities and enemy bases. Behind them, infantry marched with precision, clearing whatever was left. In just weeks, entire nations fell. Poland collapsed in less than a month. Denmark and Norway followed. France, one of the strongest nations in Europe, surrendered in just 6 weeks. It was a shock the world could not believe. To many, it seemed Hitler's army was unstoppable. Cities that had stood for centuries were crushed in days. The world began to fear that Nazi Germany truly could conquer Europe, and maybe even beyond. But this power came with a dark price. Civilians were bombed, homes destroyed, and millions forced to flee. The Lightning War wasn't just a military tactic. It was terror written across the skies of Europe. While Nazi Germany expanded across Europe, a darker and more horrifying plan was unfolding in secret. It was not just a war for land, it was a war against people. Hitler's regime believed in the idea of a pure Aryan race. Anyone who did not fit into this vision, Jews, Romani people, the disabled, political prisoners, were marked as enemies. What began as discrimination soon turned into systematic destruction. At first, Jews were forced out of their jobs, their businesses destroyed, their rights stripped away. Ghettos were created, crowded neighborhoods where families were trapped, starving and dying slowly. But the horror did not end there. By 1941, the Nazis began what they called the final solution. Millions were rounded up and sent to concentration camps, places like Auschwitz, Treblinka, Dachau. Families were separated. Men, women, and children were forced into trains, not knowing it was a one-way journey. Inside the camps, prisoners faced starvation, torture, forced labor, and mass executions. Gas chambers killed thousands every day. The smell of burning bodies filled the air around the camps. By the end of the war, over 6 million Jews and millions of others had been murdered. The Holocaust remains one of humanity's darkest chapters, a reminder of how hate, when given power, can destroy countless innocent lives. By 1945, Hitler's empire was crumbling. The once mighty Nazi war machine was broken by endless battles on two fronts. From the east, the Soviet Red Army marched with fury. From the west, American, British, and Allied forces pushed forward. Germany was surrounded. Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, became a city of ruins. Bombs rained from the sky day and night. Buildings collapsed, streets burned, and families lived in constant terror. The once proud capital was now a battlefield. Hitler, refusing to accept defeat, retreated deep into his underground bunker. Surrounded by his closest followers, he clung to illusions of victory, giving orders that no one could carry out. Outside, Soviet artillery drew closer, shaking the city with every strike. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet troops entered Berlin, Hitler made his final decision. He would not surrender. Inside the bunker, he ended his life, choosing death over capture. His body was burned quickly, leaving behind nothing but ashes. The Reich he promised would last 1,000 years had collapsed in just 12. The once terrifying dictator was gone, and Germany lay in ruins. But for millions who suffered, the scars of his reign would never fade. When the war finally ended in 1945, the world stood in silence at the destruction left behind. More than 70 million lives had been lost. Entire cities reduced to ashes. Families broken forever. The nightmare of Nazi Germany had finally ended, but the scars would remain for generations. Germany itself was split in two, east and west, its people carrying the burden of guilt and loss. The once mighty Reich that promised greatness was nothing but rubble, shame, and memory. But from these ruins came a warning to all of humanity. Hate, when combined with power, can destroy nations. Blind loyalty, when given to a single leader, can lead to disaster. And silence in the face of injustice only helps evil to grow. Today, the Holocaust and the war are remembered not just as history, but as a lesson that we must never forget. Never again should the world allow hatred, racism, and tyranny to rise unchecked. The story of Nazi Germany is not just about the past. It is a reminder for the present, and a warning for the future.